It's a momentous day, Joe Bulig, because we are officially on Circle, thanks to all of your hard work and moving everything over.
Well, he's moving most things over. It seems like there's a few things we keep finding. It's like, oh yeah, we had this tied to that. Oh yeah, recommendations aren't there. We should figure that out. Okay. Well, good news is I have a backup of the whole previous structure, so I can still go get all the things if we need to. Question is, where does it all go? That's the main thing to answer. But yes, we are on Circle. Super exciting. I know that for our pro members, what we've been calling premium members, pro members, those words are all kind of the same thing at this point anymore. You should have gotten an email from the system or me. I'm not sure how that actually came out, with an invite that gets you access to the premium side of it, the pro side of it, for a trial period. And then you'll just have to enter in your card information, and then it will continue from that point on. So if that gives you any fits, let us know. But that's really the only part of the process that is that important right now. So yeah, super exciting.
Yeah, and by doing this, we have basically been able to clean a lot of things up. So the URL, I think, stays the same, right? It's bookworm.fm/membership if you want to join. And you can actually join the Circle community without paying for the extra stuff. So just come make recommendations, join the chat, all that kind of stuff inside the community. There's also, we've have added events. So when we do the live recordings, you don't just find out an hour before when Joe sends the tweet out. We usually pick the time at the end of the recordings, and we put that on the calendar. Well, actually now there's a calendar event that you can RSVP to if you want. It's got the link to the YouTube live stream, which I think is pretty cool. And then there's also a couple of additional feeds. So we have the occasional sponsor for Bookworm now, which is awesome. And if you are a pro member, then you get access to a special section of that Circle community, which has not only the book notes, but also some additional goodies like the wallpaper and the extra feeds. So when I say feeds, plural, because Joe committed to this. I created more work for him, but he's good with it, which we all need to thank him for. So there's the normal podcast, which you've been listening to, subscribed to for a very long time. There's also the pro version, which is ad-free. And then there is the bootleg, which is basically the moment that we connect for the live calls on YouTube. Joe hits the button for like the backup recordings. He's going to take that audio. So all of our mistakes, all of our fighting with our gear, right? all of the pen chatter.
Why do people want this?
Well, I don't know. I mean, one thing I think is kind of cool was kind of like this running joke between Blake and Carol and us in the live chat is the pen of the day thing, right? So we tend to talk about things that we know not everybody is going to care about, but when we see people in the chat, we'll sometimes talk about some, or go nerdy, about some different things. I don't know. This is a nerdy podcast to begin with, but we get extra nerdy sometimes. We get a little bit silly sometimes. That is available also right after we record the live show. That's typically like a week before the actual show comes out.
Right.
So if you want to get the episodes early, that would be another reason just to get the bootleg. But if you can wait, no, you don't need to do anything. But if you want all the extra stuff, it's same price, $5 a month, $50 a year, and it's a great way to support the show. So thank you to everybody who has done that. But yeah, I'm excited that this is now in Circle. Circle is what I've been using for the faith-based productivity community, and I've used it for part-time YouTuber Academy and Ship 30 and stuff like that. It's just a great platform for connecting with people, and I'm excited to see you all over there.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I'm excited to see everybody make their way over there. So yeah, if you want to join, again, you don't have to join the pro side of it if you don't want to. But if you want to join the community even without that, it's just club.bookworm.fm. Same place the Discourse site was sitting. We just moved it over to Circle. So same URL, all the things. But if you had an account on the Discourse and we're not a pro member, you'll need to set up a new account on the Circle account. Unless you already have a Circle account, then you just join the community, I guess. I think that's how that works.
Yep.
I'm still figuring out Circle, in case you didn't know this.
I'm a part of, I think, 6 different Circle communities at this point. So one of the things I like about Circle is you've got like the switcher on the sidebar. So you can jump back and forth between the different communities without ever having to leave that website. And there's a pretty great iOS app, probably Android app too. I think that's out now. I know that came after the iOS app, but
Sure.
which can give you access to all your different Circle communities. So yeah, thanks, Joe, for making the switch.
I think we're there. Yay!
All right. Let's talk about action items. You've got one here. How'd you do with your tech shutdown?
Yeah, so I've had, I think, a couple Sundays since we talked about this. This was mainly like a Sunday afternoon type action item, which was basically to try shutting down as much tech as I can on Sunday afternoons, trying to create a bit of a, like, I don't want to say oasis, but a separation zone, if you will, from tech in general. And basically what I did was make sure that my phone was sitting on a counter right next to our Bluetooth speaker, where, like, because we tend to use it for playing music on Sunday afternoons. Like, that was all it was allowed for, and is something that I believe is going to continue to sit there on Sundays, because it was honestly pretty freeing just to not have to worry about anything on Sunday afternoons. So again, I would do it all day, but my job is on Sunday morning mostly. So can't really do that. That would be a bad day. So I don't do that, but whenever I get home, a lot of times I'll connect it to the speaker, hit play, and that's as far as it goes. So then it stays there the rest of the afternoon. So that has been super helpful. I'm glad for taking that one on, probably continuing that one for quite some time.
Cool. So I had a similar action item to unplug on the Sabbath. And I think I mentioned last time my strategy for this was going to be to create a focus mode, a Sabbath focus mode, which I did do. And it does work well. The only annoying thing about it is that my iPhone likes to make suggestions on other things that I should do with this Sabbath focus mode. And I don't want any of the suggestions. So maybe there's a way to turn off focus mode suggestions that I just haven't dove into settings to figure out. But it's working well. I just wish the additional stuff would go away because I have intentionally kept it simple. Thanks, Siri. I got this one.
I know that, like, for a while I've been using like the work focus mode for a variety of reasons, but this is super nerdy. I set up a Siri shortcut that will, when I run it, it turns on that work focus mode and then also starts a timer in toggle. So it does both of those simultaneously. And then I can trip it again and it'll reverse the process, shut the timer off and turn the focus mode off. But because I was doing that for 3 or 4 days, it learned, like, oh, when you get to this location, you're turning this mode on. Do you want us to do it for you automatically? No, I want to control that, because sometimes I want to turn that on when I'm not at that building. It's somewhere else. I don't want you to do all this fancy stuff. Just let me turn it on and off. It's okay. But after like 3 or 4 days of telling it no, it quit asking. So I don't know how long it takes for it to stop asking that question, but it's annoying.
Yeah. So speaking of shortcuts, by the way, I need to point this out. I would be derelict in my duties of mentioning Obsidian every single episode if I did not do this. Are you aware of this app, and I'm using air quotes here, called Actions for Obsidian?
No. What is this? I've not heard of this.
So this is basically a bridge between Obsidian and shortcuts. So it's made by this guy who also developed a community plugin, which adds the ability for these different callback URLs to be accessible in Obsidian via shortcuts. And then it adds 30 plus actions to shortcuts. So you can do things like take the output from a shortcut and insert it into a placeholder in your daily note. Or you can get the results from a data view table, or you can transfer all of your appointments from your calendar into your daily note at placeholders, things like that. It basically turns Obsidian into like an Apple native app in terms of the support for shortcuts. And
interesting.
I am using this at a very, very low level, but it is really cool. And I feel like if you looked at this, you would probably really love it.
Actions for Obsidian. This is on iOS.
It's on the Mac. I believe it's coming out for iOS soon. But right now it only works on the Mac. Yeah, it's on the Mac App Store, the website. If you hover over the iOS one, it actually changes to available soon. So he's still trying to figure out some of the sandboxing stuff on iOS. But if you use Obsidian on your Mac, this is pretty cool. It's got a couple different pricing tiers and you pick the one based on like how useful it is for you, which is kind of a cool pricing model. And it's got a 14-day free trial. It starts at $7.99 as a one-time purchase. But the URL is obsidian.actions.work. And it's pretty great. Has nothing to do with our action items, though. So
I see that.
I will go back and report on my last action item, which was to check out Bookshop. I did. I didn't buy anything off of Bookshop. I don't think I'm going to buy anything off of Bookshop.
Why is that? Like, I feel like it's the sort of thing that would be like a gold mine for us. So the fact that you're saying you don't think you'll buy anything off of it makes me very curious now.
Well, I mean, full disclosure, we do share affiliate links to books that we talk about in Bookworm. So if you are going to buy a book that we recommend and you click on the link in the show notes, that takes you to Amazon and we get a small kickback from that. So that is another way you can support the show. And if you don't like affiliate links, now you know, and you can avoid them. Yep. Obviously, so I'm not going to use it for any of the Bookworm stuff unless, we just made that decision together that we don't care about that extra affiliate income and we're just going to support the local bookstore because it's the right thing to do. I would be okay with that. You could talk me into that, but it's just not as simple. It's not as efficient. I buy so many books. I don't want to have to go there first every time and then go somewhere else when they don't have what I want. So they didn't have the book that we're covering today. And I don't really blame them for that. This one I hadn't really heard of until Martin recommended it. So this isn't like everybody's got this one sort of a deal. But just the fact that they may or may not have what I'm looking for, that's additional time, additional complexity. I'm not going to do that. Maybe I should, but I'm not. I can tell you, I know myself. I'm not going to do that. So I don't know. I'm not going to say other people shouldn't use it. Go ahead. Like I love the premise, but I looked at the website, poked around on it. They didn't have the book for today, so I'm like, well, that's a bummer, but I'll try it again. Went back and looked at it again, and I could feel my motivation waning every single time I went to the website. So, yeah.
All right. So I won't do it then.
Did you check it out?
No, I have not looked at it.
Yeah. I think it's easy to get excited about some of these action items in the books that we read. And the more distance you get from them, the less important they are. This one was never really that important to begin with. And so let's just say this one failed.
It was such at least to me, ended up being such a minor thing that I completely forgot that it was the thing you were doing at all.
Yeah.
It didn't even register past the recording time. So
fair enough. All right, let's talk about today's book. Today's book, which I foreshadowed as not available on Bookshop, is Master Your Motivation by Susan Fowler. And this was a recommendation from Martin. He, I think, is on the chat today. So, I'd love to hear your insights as we go here, Martin. This is a pretty short book, broken down into 3 parts and an introduction. I actually don't mind that. I think I had a kind of moment of clarity when I was looking at this book, because it is pretty small. And the subtitle is 3 Scientific Truths for Achieving Your Goals. So you could take the approach of like, oh, well, they obviously just landed on the 3 things and then they developed this whole message around this because it was a convenient number. However, there's actually a lot of science you can tell has gone into this. And I did not think that that was a superficial thing for simplicity of organization. And by the time I got done with this book, I was like, you know what? Maybe I need to reconsider my stance on 3-part books. Because we tend to write that off right at the beginning. And to be fair, a lot of the books that we have read don't need to be 3 different sections. It is a bit of a stretch. But I feel like this one's pretty clean. So there's the introduction, which is why motivation science matters. Then part 1 is the truth about motivation. Part 2 is motivation is a skill. And then part 3, what is stopping you? And there's different models associated with specifically part 1 and part 2. So part 3 is basically everything else. And I feel like it's structured pretty well. What was your first impression of this book? And even more granular, what about the topic of motivation? When I picked this one, were you excited by it, or did you find yourself resisting this topic?
It was kind of a mix of both, in that, like, I know motivation is something that I tend to struggle with. I'm aware of that. So the concept of reading a book about motivation, pretty excited about that. But whenever it has something like 3 scientific truths for achieving your goals and master your motivation, like, that's pretty high claim, and kind of makes me think, is this going to be one of these philosophical grand ideas books that is like almost impossible to implement except for like 0.01% of the population? That was my skepticism coming in pre-read on the book. So it's like, okay, how's this going to go? It's either going to go in the territory where this is life-changing for Joe anyway, or it's going to go down the territory of this is baloney. It's possible it fits somewhere in the middle, but my expectation was it was going to go one of those 2 directions.
All right. What did you think overall, just at the beginning here? Like, which way do you find yourself being pulled?
Between those 2 directions, yeah. Honestly, I think I'm somewhere in the middle. As
right.
Weird as I think that is, like, I don't know that I have clean, like, this is going to make a big difference to me in this area. Like, this is a lot of, like, here's how you should think type of book. And those types of books can be awesome. But I think it's sometimes difficult to know, is this book one that's going to be awesome for me long term, until I've had, a few months to just see how it impacts my continual mindsets beyond the time I'm reading the book. So I don't know that I'm going to have super clean answer to that right now. At the same time, like, I know that the way that she's coming at this, again, you mentioned like the 3-partedness of this, and it's one that we tend to rail on a little bit. It's like, oh no, here we go, another 3-part book. But at the same time, this is doing a pretty good job of just kind of walking us through the process of, here are the components of motivation, and then here are some ways that you can go about learning the skill of motivation, basically explaining how that works, and then at the end kind of walking us through what is the process that's going to break it down. So when you've got it laid out like that, it gets kind of hard to argue with. But I think the proof is in the action on this one. Like,
sure,
what actually comes to fruit after having read this. I can tell you that just noticing different scenarios, like, okay, well, what's motivating me to complete my credit card statement for the month? And what is the method that I'm using to motivate myself on that? And then seeing how that is terrible is super helpful. But I can't say that I would have expected understanding that until I read this.
Sure.
So it has been helpful in that sense.
Okay. Well, I guess I picked this book because I was interested in the topic of motivation, but didn't have anything specific that I was looking to change. There wasn't a reason that I wanted to do a book on motivation, just other than it was an interesting topic to me, because we've talked about willpower and a lot of like the creative stuff is there's this imagery of conquering the resistance and things like that. I've kind of long believed that motivation is more important than willpower or maybe even discipline. Like it can override that in
Sure.
certain situations, but I didn't have like a specific situation where I was like, I want to apply this. Just the topic was interesting to me at the time, and this was a recommendation that looked pretty good. So we picked it up, and let's jump in here. The first part we're going to talk about is just the introduction, and one of the things that I liked about this introduction is just the way that the stage is set for this discussion on motivation. The introduction has a subtitle of Why Motivation Science Matters. And there's two big things here that kind of stood out to me. Number one, she directly addresses Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm not sure what you think about Maslow's hierarchy. Do you think like, oh, this makes a ton of sense and this is the way the world works? Or do you think it's a bunch of baloney? I don't know. What?
It's one that like I've seen it so many times, and then I've also seen so many people break it down in different ways that it's like, okay, this is one that like, sure, I mean there's got to be some foundational truth there somewhere, but the subtleties might break down in a variety of ways. So I can't say that I have a strong opinion. I wouldn't come up to you and say Maslow's hierarchy is horrific. You should never pay attention to it. I would never say that. I'm also not going to come up to you and say, hey, you really need to think about this. This is a big deal. I'm not going to do that either. It's like a neutral point for me.
Well, she basically says the first in the nicest way I've ever heard. She says that Maslow's hierarchy of needs has never been empirically proven, which that statement kind
Yep.
of was shocking to me when I heard that, because I know people who take Maslow's hierarchy as like this is gospel truth on the way that humans are wired. And I've
Yep.
always thought it was a little bit, I don't know, it just never really sat right with me whenever I looked at that. Like you look at it and it kind of makes sense, but I never was able to buy into it 100%, and I never really understood why. And so I felt validated by that statement. And then she kind of talks about the thing that is more important in her words, and I think I would side with her on this, and that is this self-determination theory, which is the foundation of motivation science. Now, that term self-determination, basically what that means is that you are the captain of your own ship and you have the ability to chart your own course, and you can become the type of person that you want to be and create the life that you want to live. And that is something that I have actually brought up many, many times on this podcast. We've talked about it a lot, but it stems for me from the family business. My dad started a software company and developed a whole bunch of products based off of a whole bunch of research on the topic of emotional intelligence and social emotional learning, things like that. Self-determination is a big part of that. So for a long time, I worked with the family business, and we sold educational assessment skill building products to schools, and the populations that we worked with were special education primarily or at risk. And self-determination specifically is the thing that can turn an at-risk kid's life around, because they typically don't come from the best scenario, and they're firmly entrenched in victim thinking. And as long as they continue to think that way, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Their environment doesn't create an opportunity for them to succeed. And I want to iterate here that that doesn't mean that I recognize that like bad things happen to people, and sometimes it's not your fault. But when it happens, like you can accept that you have the power to change it or not, and it's much more freeing to embrace this self-determination theory. So self-determination, I totally understand how this can be the foundation for motivation, and I really enjoyed, selfishly, I guess, seeing it here. What do you think about this?
The self-determination piece.
Yeah, and also just as like the this is kind of the launching off point for the rest of the book, obviously on motivation. Do you see the connection there, and what do you think about the case that she's making here?
Yeah, I think she's got a pretty solid case in that you've got a lot in your head that can completely change how you see a situation or see a scenario happening. Whenever I think about like what motivates me to get up in the morning and exercise, like when I think about something like that, it can change from the simple thought process of this is a great way for me to get energy in the day. I'm excited to go get my energy for the day. That's very different than, oh, I don't want to get out of bed. Like, those are completely different ways of thinking about the exact same scenario. And in one of those cases, it makes it easy to get out of bed and get going. And in the other case, you don't ever want to get out of bed. So just knowing that, and that's kind of what she's laying out here. And she does end up, talking through that throughout the book, like pointing the whole topic at that concept, and knowing that is all in my head, it gets kind of hard to argue with, especially when she's got a lot of the science that proves that that's the case. So I don't know that I have any arguments on it, but I think she does a pretty good job of setting up the foundation for the rest of the book with it.
What's your mental state after this point in the book? Are you all right? I'm excited. Let's make this happen, or are you like hesitant as you walk into the next section?
At this point, I'm like, prove it. So.
The skeptic. All right.
Okay, this might be great, but I need you to prove it.
Gotcha. Well, I was definitely excited by this.
Yes, and I want to point out that a lot of my opinion on that and the reason I had that viewpoint is just the whole ADD thing. Like, sure, that's great in general population terms, but does that hold true in every scenario? She didn't really call out, as far as I remember, anywhere in the book exceptions to these rules.
Yep.
So that being the case, it would make me think that her assumption is this works for everybody.
Yeah.
So I don't think she really has any qualifiers to any of it, which is sometimes in a lot of cases that usually means that they either didn't think about it or they have thought about it and chose to leave that wide open because they know that it is applicable to everybody. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really hard to know which way they intend that or the way that it came across. Like, did they even think about it? I don't know. But I think going through this, like I think at this point, I understand that this is very likely going to apply in my scenario. But when I was going through it at the time, it's like, okay, I need you to back this up. I need you to prove it.
Sure. Well, I mean, that's a great place to go into the next section. So the actual meat of the book starts with part 1, which is the truth about motivation. And there are 5 chapters here. I don't want to go through all 5 of these chapters. I've kind of grouped the outline here under the 3 different parts. But I will outline the chapters here real briefly in this first part. So chapter 1 is 3 scientific truths. Chapter 2 is motivation isn't what you think. And then chapters 3 through 5 get into the 3 truths. So chapter 3 is create choice. Chapter 4, create connection. Chapter 5, create competence. Okay, so that actually is the first thing I wanted to discuss here is I feel like in chapter 1, she makes a very good case for the way that she has deconstructed maybe the whole idea of motivation. She mentions that we have a natural yearning to thrive, and I like that word thrive. That's not the word I was expecting, but it was the one that instantly resonated with me. And then she says that to thrive, we need 3 things. We need choice, we need connection, and we need competence. And in the back of my mind, the whole time I'm hearing her talk about these 3 things, I'm thinking about the burnout inventory that we took and how these things are directly connected there, although I couldn't map them live here for you. It is clear to me that these things, and whether you have these or not have these, this is directly or inversely maybe connected to the amount of burnout that you feel. And burnout essentially is the complete absence of motivation. You can't summon the energy to act, and that's how she defines it, actually, is the energy to act. All right, so that being said, there are these three things that we need: choice, connection, and competence. I think we should talk about these a little bit. So when you create choice, your energy is increased. When you don't, your energy is diminished. When you create connection, the energy is there that you need to act, but when you don't, your energy is compromised. It's kind of like sabotaged. When you need to create competence. When you don't have competence, then your energy is blocked. Like, it's there, but it can't manifest. And when you create choice, connection, and competence, you can flourish. But when these things are eroded, you languish. I will pause there and just get your thoughts on those things as a whole, and then maybe we can dive into these a little bit deeper, component by component.
Yeah, these three different pieces, like choice, connection, competence, like those are the three parts that she's going to use as like that. If you have those three, motivation comes. And she did define motivation as the energy to act, which is interesting to me, just because like so many times we think about like, I'm just not motivated to, I don't even know. It seems like whenever I hear people talk about not being motivated, it's usually around something they need to act on. But there's also times when it's something they just need to think about. It's like, no, I just wasn't motivated to think through that scenario. Like that seems to come up as well. So it is interesting to me that it's the energy to act is what she's referring to here. Though you could argue that thinking through a scenario would be an action. Like, it could be a physical, like typing something out or writing it out by hand. That's a digression. But the three pieces, choice, connection, competence, I don't have anything that would tell me that I could argue with these. I started trying to like process the scenarios in the past where, and she calls this out, when you have these three, the flow state tends to come. And I was trying to process like what are the times when I achieve that flow state, and then I was attempting to figure out if I had those three different components, but at the same time, like some of those are so far removed that I don't know that I could accurately answer that question of did I have all three of these. I know that some of the more recent scenarios, the answer was yes. And the times when I don't want to do something, because this is common, I don't want to do that. And though in those scenarios, at least one, if not two, in a couple cases, all three of these were missing. At least my view of it, they were missing. We'll talk about that a little bit later, what I mean by that. But the construct here of choice, these three C's, like it seems like it's the sort of thing that just makes sense once she explains it. And once she starts kind of going through some of the science behind each of them, it's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess I don't have anything to argue with you on. I kind of want to have something to argue with you on, but I just can't find it. And as much as I wanted to, like, this is kind of the part in the book where I was like, okay, this is probably something I need to embrace and just take on. Like, my skepticism was starting to fade a little bit here, purely because of like the scientific proof that comes with it. I don't know that, like, it's a scenario where there are stories and examples of each of these, and you could easily take those stories and then internalize them as like, yeah, this works really well, I should do those things. But I don't know how that pans out real world internally for each of us. Like, what does that even mean? Are these fluke scenarios that she picked out? I doubt it. But at the same time, it's like, I've not done this firsthand. So there's a piece of me that's probably always going to be a skeptic until I've done that. So, which is why, like, I'm just kind of curious to see how the next 2 weeks goes and seeing how this pans out. I haven't quite figured out how to write that as an action item, but I want to see how these three pieces tie together to help create motivation. But again, I haven't quite figured out how to write that down. Like, how do I tell you this is what I want to do? other than just, here's a way that I'm hoping to think over the next 2 weeks. Sure. Did I do it or not? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know that I could tell you when we're done, but it's something I'm curious about.
Yeah, well, let's kind of break these down one by one. So the first one is choice, right? And she points out that when you think you can't have something, it ends up becoming the only thing you can think about. And how, again, with all of these, she would say we have this innate need for these things, right? But when she's talking about choice, she's talking about we need to perceive that we are the ones in charge of our own actions, that we have options. And to create choice, there's different things you can do. You can perceive you have choices. You can recognize and feel you have options within your boundaries. You can feel that you're in control of your actions. But the thing that really stood out to me from this section is that even if you don't have freedom, you can still experience choice. So this is entirely based on your perspective. Now, I have felt this way before, where it's like, I don't have any options. I have to remain committed to this choice that I made. And reading through this chapter, I was able to identify different scenarios throughout the course of my life where it's like, you know what? I was totally looking at that from the wrong perspective. I felt trapped, and I felt my motivation being diminished, right? I've been in that place where it's really, really hard just to get up and go to work in the morning. And I realized after reading this chapter that nothing about my situation would have needed to change in order for me to feel completely different about it. And that can make you feel uncomfortable, again, depending on whether you buy into the self-determination theory or not, right? But when you admit that it's your fault, that's actually freeing, because it means that you are the problem, but you're also the solution. The power lies within you to change your world. And I think that's a pretty powerful idea. What about you? Do you feel currently like you have choice, or maybe you pick a scenario, from your previous experience and maybe how this played out a little bit different?
Well, I know that this is, and Martin's commenting on it. This is the section where she talks about man's search for meaning, because it's important to point out that this is, choice is not freedom. Like, those are two different things. And the fact that she calls out Viktor Frankl here in this choice piece, he had no choice. He could not leave. He was in camp, and there was no way he was going to get out of that concentration camp. Like, that was his sentence, basically. And yet he felt he had a choice. So who am I to argue with this concept of I can change my mind and I do have a choice no matter how bad the situation appears? Like, that's not something I'm allowed to use as an excuse. That gets kind of difficult for me to come to grips with, just because I want to blame something. Like, I want to have an excuse if I don't get something done, or I don't want to be in a situation. Like, I want an excuse, and in most cases I want to blame somebody else. But whenever I think through different scenarios where maybe I've got an event at the church and they need help setting up a specific set of tech for it, and I don't want to go help, like, that does happen. You would think I would be all over it, but there's some situations where I just don't want to. And some of that has to do with the attitude of the other person and how they approached me and how they asked for help, what their expectation is of me. Do they expect me to do everything last minute and tell me an hour before it's supposed to be done? Or do they tell me it's going to be a really big deal 3 months out, and then they give me tons of time to work on it? I'm still not going to do anything until the week of, but at least we know what's coming and I don't have to try to gather all the details. Like, those two different scenarios, I tend to have very different reactions to. Yep. And it's primarily just because of an external thing that I've placed at the forefront of what's motivating me to act. It's my choice on what I'm focusing on. And to me, that's the critical point here, is like, what you're focusing on is the choice you're making. I could focus on the positive aspects of it and have one viewpoint on it, have a very optimistic viewpoint on it, or I could focus on the negative sides of it and have a very pessimistic kind of an upset mentality over it. So having that choice is super important, but I don't like coming to grips with that.
Well, the relationship aspect of it leads into the connection part, which this is interesting to me. And I would actually defend your lack of motivation to go help somebody after reading this, because I had to kind of wrestle through this part. But connection is authentically caring about others and feeling cared for by them. And I think it is okay to say, I don't have the relationship that I should have with this person. Now, you can do what you will with that, right? And you can do things on your end maybe to fix that relationship. I'm thinking of a situation from the day job where there was somebody that I work with very closely now, and just the way things went down at the beginning of my work there for 6-9 months, there were a lot of changes being pushed through, and I was the new guy, and basically the entire team kind of assumed that all of these, in their view, negative changes that were happening were being pushed through by Mike. And to this day, there are still attitudes that I need to work on. But this one person specifically, they had that because of the atmosphere of the day job, and then all of a sudden, I'm working very closely with her. She's on my team, right? And we've been working closely together now just for a couple of months, but the way that we work is totally different. And essentially what she found out was what the narrative that was being told through the grapevine at the company was not reflective of me as an individual. And it's kind of been completely different to the point where, that narrative is still being spun. And in our connect yesterday, she's telling me that she heard stuff from people, and I don't want to know who it was. I don't need to know who it is individually, but she's like, just so you know, this is still going on. And she's getting like visibly upset that people are thinking about me that way.
Yeah.
And I share that story just because it became clear to me when we had that conversation how much the connection and the relationship had improved, and how differently the way that we work and the quality of the work that we're able to do together has changed. And is that my fault that it's still that way with the rest of the people? No, not at all. But, I'm going to do what I can to improve it still. I'm not going to be like, well, you guys are the ones who need to change your thinking about things. It'd be nice if I had a little bit more support there. Right? I'm asking for that. Maybe I'll get it. Maybe I won't. We'll see. But I'm not gonna let it stop me. But also, I'm not going to, because the other approach that I would typically take is, well, this is my fault and it's completely on me to change this. No, I have choice. I have options. Right. So for me, I'm starting to see how these things kind of fit together. And overall, what it's done is it's helped me feel more confident in my abilities. Maybe that is the third one here too. And I don't want to just talk through this whole section on my own. I want to hear what you have to say too. But the competence piece is the being able to experience progress, gain mastery, feel confident and resilient. Well, what I realized was that I have grown a lot in my abilities and my skills. When I first came into this position, I didn't think I could do it. I've learned a lot though, and I realized I'm actually really, really good at what I do. I looked at some charts of like the revenue for the organization, and it's actually gone like off a cliff since January of last year. And you just look at that one, you're like, holy cow, this company's in big trouble. But then you look at the profit one and you see in the last 6 months, we're just like crushing it, right? So, hey, good job, me. I am actually good at this.
Yeah.
And so like I was viewing myself as not very good at my job because of a lack of connection, which I have no control over. I can't change the story that people tell in their heads. I'll pick away at it here and there when I can, but I realized that was creating like this limiting belief in my mind, and I was starting to feel depressed, and that's really a big reason why I was so burnt out. It's like, nothing I do here matters. Nobody cares. Right? I had to get over that.
Yeah, I know that as I look at these three different components, like choice, if I have a choice about what I'm going to do or how I perceive the thing I'm going to do. And I'm well connected with the people I'm doing it with, or at least with the purpose behind it. And then I feel like I have all the skills to do it. Like if you start putting those three pieces together, getting the motivation to do something is easy. But you remove one of those three, like if like take the competence piece you were talking about in your role. If you take on a new role and you feel like it's outside the zone of your current skill set, you really have one of two things you can do. You can either go at it and try to figure out how to do that well, or you can say, I'm terrible at this and do a terrible job. Like you can get better at it. And if you take it and get better at it and you develop your competence in that area, it then becomes something you want to do more of. And I've kind of seen this like in the world of running soundboards for church events and bands and such. I've found that like when I first started doing it, it was interesting, but I was always kind of frustrated by it or didn't really want to do it just because I felt like I could never quite get the band to sound good. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. Learning how to mix live is a whole different animal than from like the recording and editing piece. Like it's just different in so many ways. It's the same in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it's very different. You don't have the time to work through things, so you just treat things differently. And learning how to do things live and getting better at that, like right now, if you told me I needed to go run sound for a band, I'd be pretty amped about that. Like that would be pretty exciting to me just because I know, even if it's on a soundboard I've never used before, like that's totally fine. Like I know the concepts well enough at this point that I would be pretty excited about that. But that's because my competence level in that world has increased such that it's something that I feel like I could do a really good job at. So anyway, when you have these three, like it's a big deal. And I feel like the more I think through different scenarios and what's motivating me to do something or not to do something, I can usually trace it to one of these three is missing somewhere. So again, I don't know how to argue with her on this.
Yeah, that's the main point with chapter 2. So I'm kind of doing this out of order. So we talked about choice, connection, and competence already, but that's 3, 4, and 5. Now going back to number 2, when it comes to motivation, the quality of your energy matters. So when you create choice, connection, and competence, that generates this high quality motivation, which leads to optimal motivation. And this is the point where she talks about how willpower and discipline are red flags because they're a warning of suboptimal motivation. And I specifically chose this point after we talked about choice, connection, and competence because I think it's really easy to see that she's right here. And all the studies about willpower and discipline, it doesn't mean that those things should be ignored. But I do think that, at least myself, I was tending to view willpower and discipline, the Roy Baumeister studies and all that kind of stuff. I was relying on that stuff too much. And it's easy to see after going through chapters 3, 4, and 5, how if you really can dial in choice, connection, and competence, you can create that feeling where you get up in the morning and you're excited to do what you have to do. And it doesn't matter how much willpower or discipline you have, that perspective is going to make the difference. You compare that to the burned out stage where you're dreading going into the office and you look at your output at the end of the day. Absolutely, you're going to get more work done and better work done when you have the motivation, regardless of whether you wear the same thing every day or you are trying to decide what to have for breakfast. I mean, those are the types of things that all those little productivity tips and the life hacks, which really just kind of drive me nuts now. It's like, got to preserve your willpower, got to make sure that you have it for the decisions that really matter. Well, no, if you're excited about the decisions that you have to make, then it doesn't really matter. It's kind of my takeaway from this. If you have limited motivation, if you haven't ever considered choice, connection, and competence, then yeah, probably you do need to make sure that you manage that stuff because you don't have much to go around.
Yeah, this is, I mean, it is a big deal, right? The more I think about, what motivation isn't and how we've previously thought of, like, you got to be disciplined, motivate yourself. That concept, Whenever she starts talking about, here's kind of my view on this whole first part, right? So the three pieces, these three C's: choice, connection, and competence. If you just replace the term discipline, self-discipline specifically, and replace that term self-discipline with choice, connection, and competence, like that collective motivational framework, you can pretty much do a straight copy replace, find and replace, just anywhere you see that. And I was trying to think through, like, you got to be disciplined to do your workouts in the morning. It's like, well, if I do these three things, workouts get to be a lot easier. Take simple stuff like doing push-ups. Like if you're going to do push-ups for your exercise, like if you're not good at push-ups or you can't do more than one, you don't have competence in doing push-ups. So you don't want to do a workout because it's just going to accent the point that you can't do this. But if you go, if push-ups is the thing you want to do, go look up progressive push-up workouts, like ways that you can make them easier so that you can do a bunch of them. And then it gets to where you can eventually get to where you're doing 10 push-ups at a time, like legitimate ones. So finding ways to make yourself competent in that, like that's just a silly, simple, cartoonish type answer, right? But it isn't self-discipline in that case. It's just purely trying to make it so that you have these three components so that you're motivated to do it. Having self-discipline and disciplining yourself so that you have the motivation to do something like that doesn't really work that way, at least not long term. It can in the short term, but this is why our wonderful New Year's resolutions last about a week and a half, because they just don't make it past that point.
Yep. So you're talking about discipline, and I think another word that goes along with that is like diligence. And I'm going to share something in the chat here. Toby, well, all of our kids are homeschooled and we do classical conversations. Part of classical conversations is you have to learn Latin.
Yeah, our kids are learning Latin too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Toby posted this thing in the faith-based productivity community about, he did a word study for diligence. And what he found was that the English word for diligence is a very different definition than the Latin root that it's kind of based off of. And the Latin root, essentially, I'm paraphrasing this, it's all about love, right? So when we think about diligence, we think about, I have to do this thing that I don't want to do, right? Or discipline. It's like, I'm going to show up and do the hard thing. And I realized as I was reading through this post that Toby put together, if it's based out of love, then really like do what you love. There is some truth to that. But you have to create the motivation to love what you do. It's not you just find the fun thing and then you do that the rest of your life, but you find the thing that you have to do and you create the motivation through the three levers that she's talking about here: choice, connection, and competence. And then you bring that perspective to the thing that you have to do. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. He gets into some different Bible verses that talk about diligence, and if you read those through the lens of like it's being motivated by love, it totally changes the definition.
Yeah.
You can pick and choose, obviously, individual things and do a big Hebrew and Greek word studies and kind of make those mean what you want, which you got to be careful when you're doing that sort of an interpretation of a religious text. But I think it's a pretty cool idea.
Yeah, I'm just kind of glancing through Toby's post here. It's like, that'll make you kind of wonder.
Yep.
Like the root of the word diligent coming from the Latin word that involves love. Like,
And then
interesting. That'll mess with your head a little bit.
Complementary to that is the Latin root for the word passion, which is pati, which means to suffer. Right? So passion isn't do what you love, but what do you care enough about that you're willing to go through some things? In other words, what do you have enough motivation for to show up and do?
And around we go.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, I think, leading into part 2 here. I think this is a great place to transition, because part 2 is motivation is a skill. So all of this stuff that we're talking about in terms of your perspective and bringing the motivation to what you need to do, you have the ability to get better at this. And this one is broken down into 3 different chapters. So chapter 6, identify your outlook. Chapter 7, shift your outlook. Chapter 8, reflect on your outlook. And she's got a very simple diagram here of how these things are kind of like a flywheel. They feed each other. Let's start with identify your outlook. She shares the spectrum of motivation model here. Do you remember this?
Yeah, she's got it in the back cover of the book too.
Yep.
Which makes it easy to find.
Yeah, I like this a lot. You want to try to explain this, to kind of walk through like what this is visually?
Yeah, so basically there's 6 different ways that you can view your, maybe not view, but 6 different ways that your motivation, your outlook on motivation can be seen. And 3 of these are what she calls suboptimal, and 3 of those are optimal. And the 3 suboptimal would be disinterested, external, and imposed. The easy way to come at that is the disinterested is like you just don't care about something at all. So your view on a specific situation is you have no interest in it whatsoever. So obviously you're not going to be motivated to do anything about it. You could have an external outlook on a situation or a thing, which would just mean you're looking at external rewards, incentives, and the like to motivate you to do something. You could have an imposed outlook, basically someone else's view being given to you. This probably comes into play a lot from like what your parents told you, things you said over and over and over again. She told the story about someone his parents always told him he needed to finish what he started, and he was obese. So he took it literally in every sense and didn't even realize that that's what he was doing. He would load his plate up and then eat more than he wanted to, but he had to finish it because you always have to finish what you start. So like stuff like that is where that one comes in. But then you get to the 3 that are kind of above the fold, if you will, that are in the optimal outlook territory. Aligned, integrated, and inherent. Basically, you're aligned with like the values of something. There is the integrated, where you're kind of like, I kind of struggled with this one, but like you're a part of the whole thing. Like what you value and what they value is the same thing, and you're good at it, blah, 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 all the things. So you become really well intertwined with the situation. And then there's inherent, where you're motivated to do something just because the nature of the thing aligns so perfectly with what you see your mission in life is that you can't see why you wouldn't do it. So it kind of takes it so far that not doing it is more of an issue than doing it. So the motivation is like second nature at that point. So those are the 6 different parts. At least those are in the chart graph of sorts in the back of the book.
Yeah, exactly. And the point that she makes around this is that you're always motivated. The question is, what kind of motivation do you have? And to add a little bit of additional context to this, there is an X and Y axis to this. So from the point in the lower left, that is low quality. And then whether you go up or to the right, it's a scale of high quality. And the 2 axes are on the X axis. On the bottom, you've got psychological needs. And on the y-axis, so going up, you have self-regulation. So there's this kind of curve with these different types of motivation. Disinterested is way in the bottom. And then there's external, and that is all based off of like the carrot and the stick analogy.
Yep.
And she kind of dispels that throughout the rest of this book and saying that's not a good way to do it. Although I think a lot of businesses and organizations still view that as like the way to motivate people. And then the imposed one is the one that's interesting to me. That's the 3rd one, and you're getting kind of like right in the middle of the graph then, but you're still a little bit below that line like you were talking about. And that's the one that I think it's easy to slip into. You just assume these things and you don't ever question them, and then they kind of drive a whole bunch of behavior. And so I realized recently that I had fallen into this one. Specifically, I didn't want to let people down. So I've come pretty far in terms of my needing to be a people pleaser, but I realized that this is kind of the motivation that gets me to go back to that. is they have this expectation, whether that's real or it's imagined. I attach to that, and then I kind of feel like it doesn't matter what sort of circumstances I'm in, what kind of obstacles I'm facing, I will produce the result that they expect. And I kind of had this moment of clarity when I was looking at this. It's like, so you mean I don't have to just assume that? Well, what does that look like then? It means that I have permission to say those expectations I am not going to be in alignment with. Going back to the first section, like I have choice now. Even if I'm not going to take that choice, it is at least a choice, right? So I think there's a lot of people who maybe you find yourself in a job and you feel like, I can't get out of this job, but I don't like it, right? Well, if you are able to actually flip that switch and say, you know what, I could actually go get another job. I don't want to, right? It's a lot of work. I don't know what's out there. That's scary. Like these are all legit resistance and legitimate things that you have to take into consideration. But if you can overcome all of that and realize that you do have the option, that kind of changes everything else. And that's the thing that gets you from that low level motivation to a higher level of motivation. And that's ultimately what we're after. That's what this whole part is about. You have to, first of all, identify where you're at, because you always need to know where you are before you can know where you are going. Okay, so you kind of have to buy into this spectrum of motivation model at the beginning, which is why I brought it up. But then from there, the second step is to shift your outlook. Okay, this is where I am. I'm going to create choice, connection, and competence as I attempt to shift from one of these lower levels of motivation to a higher level of motivation. And then there are different things that you can do in order to get to that. I've got a couple of action items from this book. Actually, I think all of them come from chapter 7. Just looking through my outline here. Yeah. So number 1 is to make a list of what I value. And there are different things that you can use to figure that out. One of the things she suggests is, how do I spend my time and my money, right? Or thinking through, where are the discrepancies between my espoused values and my developed values. I think that's a really cool way of saying, like, everyone has this idea of the type of person that they want to be, the values that drive their actions. I'm this type of person. Well, do your actions actually back that up? Because if not, there's a disconnect there and you have to figure that out. But then ultimately, I mean, I love this whole discussion of values and core values. You know, we've got core values for our family. This is a big thing for me, personal mission statement, all that kind of stuff. But I feel like she frames it really well in this chapter about how not all of your beliefs are values, but all your values are beliefs. All right. So if we were to unpack that, not everything that you think is going to be a primary value. It's not going to be a driver of your actions and motivations, but all of your values will drive those actions and the things that you do. And ultimately, all of those values are personal choices. So there's no right or wrong way to do this, but you got to figure out what these are for yourself.
I kind of want to go back to the motivational outlooks, because you were talking about like this imposed outlook. To me, that's the one that I probably suffer from the most. Like just adopting somebody else's. Like this is the expectation that somebody else has set. I do not want to be that person who lets them down. And that's where like the people pleaser perfectionist can come in, and kind of bringing that into chapter 7, the one you're talking about, shift your outlook. To me, that's like the critical chapter in the whole book. It's not quite in the middle of the book, but it's like a core component of the entire book. It's like, okay, here's how motivation works. Here's where it's flawed. Here's how you can view that motivation. Like, what is it that's actually motivating you now? Now, here's how you can change it. Like, that's the part to me that kind of puts the rubber to the road on this. It's like, here are some examples. Here are ways that you can start to identify how you're viewing a situation. And I've kind of alluded to this throughout the episode. It's like, here's where, like, just knowing that these 3 components are there tweaking one of those three or adding or subtracting different scenarios or different things in a specific conversation or project, then it can completely change the way you're coming at it. Like there's even a story of how there was I think it was a branch manager found out their company was going to be shut down in 2 years' time. So she could either, lamented it and people could have, quit ahead of time because it's going to get shut down anyway. They could have done all that, but instead she viewed it as a chance to celebrate everything the company had been doing for the last 25 years and made it a big deal and completely changed the whole outcome. Nobody quit early on that whole team. So like that's a big deal, and it's purely because of a change and a shift in your outlook on the situation. Like that's the part that I think would be the most critical, at least for me, just trying to figure out how that works and how can I get that to work for me. I don't really have, I didn't write down any action items on this, but like this is the part that got me thinking about, okay, I need to do something. I don't know what. Other than like, let's pay attention to what is happening and how these things are panning out, because I feel like this is something that I need to continue to work on, and yet I know that it's one that I haven't had a lot of success with in the past. So this whole section on shift, which does lead into the next one on reflect, like just reflecting on the outlook that you have, like those two in conjunction with each other, like I feel like those could have a pretty big impact.
Absolutely. And the framing of the reflect section, which I think is really powerful, is that when you've created choice, you can initiate more. When you've created connection, you can develop more. When you've created competence, you can build more. And just that framing, I really appreciate. Basically, what she's saying is that the minute that you start to make any sort of progress, that's just the beginning. There's a snowball effect here. But it's also not systematic. It's not formulaic. It's not just do these three things. Like, you have to figure out for yourself what progress looks like in these different areas. But I think it is really powerful at this point. The reflect piece is very important because you have to recognize your success and your ability. Going all the way back to self-determination, it's like, see, you could do it, even if it's just a little bit. And then it's, okay, so you've done this now. Let's do it on a bigger scale. And when reflecting, she talks about focusing on the why. The goal of asking why, mindfulness. There's that word again.
Yep.
But one thing that is interesting, she calls out here, is that mindfulness isn't much harder than mindlessness. And that's kind of challenging if you're going to sit and wrestle with that. So you're saying that all this trouble I have with mindfulness meditation, it's actually not that much harder for me to just drift from thing to thing and scroll through the endless feeds. I'm kind of speaking generically now, although mindfulness meditation is something that I have struggled with. I kind of think that my reason I've kind of struggled with that is I have a different form of that in the prayer practice that I've established, so I just don't see the need for that. I do think I would be beneficial if I was able to cultivate it and make it a discipline, but the motivation isn't there. However, looking at this, maybe I need to go back and revisit that. That is not an action item. The thing I'm calling out here is that we tend to just default to a lot of our choices. It's kind of our brain's efficiency mechanism. 90% of what we do is based off of habit. Well, if we'd never really thought about it, we've never really tried to deconstruct those things and figure out ways that we can create motivation to either do the right thing or not do the wrong thing. Again, deciding for yourself what those are, that's our own fault. And the fact that we haven't been mindful about or intentional about those choices, he's basically saying there's no excuse here. It's really not that hard. You just have to be aware of it. You have to be aware of your feelings. You have to be aware of the reasons behind your motivations, and you have to be able to recognize new perspectives and try them out, which kind of gets into the whole idea of like the mental models and just the way that you think about things, which obviously that's a topic that I'm really excited about and interested in. But she kind of sets this up in a way that I feel like there's more options. Going back to choice, right? I feel like I have some possibilities available to me with this now that I didn't feel previously, if that makes sense. And that's really the whole power of this last step, because again, this feeds the next step. All right. So when you reflect, you're actually looking at where you are again, and has that changed from previously? And if it has, or if it hasn't, why, and what are you going to do about it again? It's this perpetuating cycle, and you can either direct it and it can be positive, or you can just default to it and it can be negative.
One of my favorite parts of that chapter, Reflect on Your Outlook, towards the beginning of it, she makes the comment, talking to yourself isn't crazy, which I appreciate because I'm regularly asking myself questions, listen to me, myself questions. Maybe there's multiple of me. That would actually explain quite a few things. You can ask yourself questions. You can, have conversations with yourself. I've started doing this verbally, which is entertaining for my kids. It's like, why did you do that, Joe? Like, I will ask myself that question out loud, very emphatically at times. And like, Dad, you dropped your hammer. It's like, that's where it went. Good job, Joe. Like, I will do stuff like that. Now, that's not exactly what she's talking about, but she's essentially referring to asking yourself questions, answering those questions. Like, why was I afraid to go into that meeting? What was it that was causing anxiety about going into that meeting? Why was I not? Okay, well, there was this person in there that I don't get along with. Okay, why don't you get along with them? And just running down that process and just trying to figure out what is it about that particular meeting that's got you out of sorts. So I really appreciate that. I'm glad that it's okay that I can talk to myself. I'm going to continue doing that, and hopefully it's not weird. Or maybe it is weird. It's okay.
That actually begins to get into this last section. So let's go to part 3 next, which is what is stopping you. And this is basically where she disarms a lot of the excuses, starting with chapter 9, I can't shift. Chapter 10, beware fatal distractions. Chapter 11 is work hazards. And then chapter 12 is can people change? All right. So chapter 9, I can't shift. This is all about limiting beliefs and knowing yourself. And this is kind of where she talks about journaling providing an opportunity for mindfulness. And this is another version of talking to yourself.
Yep.
Right. But she says that you can't thrive when you carry a backpack full of junk food motivation. At that point, it's like, oh, she's reading my mail. So there's a lot in this that is going to force you to take a hard look at yourself. And if you bought into the self-determination theory, you're comfortable with that. If not, I can see why you might just disconnect at this point altogether. Chapter 10, beware fatal distractions. This is kind of where she talks about how the world is energy. And the real question is, what are you doing with it? So we can just get sucked up into the busyness, or we can be intentional and direct our intention where we want it to go. We can be in power of it or not. But the last part in, chapter 11 is work hazards. And this is where she encourages you to look beyond the incentives, and working for the wrong reasons will ultimately diminish your results. She talks about connection at work, which I think is really important. And she mentions that connection is eroded when you experience unfairness. So that is really something for me to be to be considering with working with the team. I don't have an action item associated with that, but that was one of those things like, hey, kind of look for this, right? See if you can recognize when it's happening and do what you can to avoid it. But the last part, I think, is the really cool part. We're all constantly changing. So yes, people can change. Everyone goes through predictable stages of concern during a change. So it always is going to feel weird at first, and you don't have to feel bad about that. But then there are questions that you can ask yourself, which kind of get you thinking about things through the right lens. Again, I love me some questions. So what choices do I have? What meaning can I make from all of this? And what can I learn? Those are just some examples of questions. I'm sure there's lots of other ones that you could use. But what I really like about these questions is it's all based on what am I going to make of the situation that I am in. It's not how am I going to change the situation? How am I going to change my circumstances? Although what choices maybe is a little bit in that direction. But then what meaning can I make from all of this? All of this doesn't change. But the meaning that I I glean from it, that absolutely can change. Or what can I learn from this season or this failure that I find myself in the middle of? Well, I can take something from that, something positive, and I can use that next time. So I think that's a really cool way to end the book.
Yes. That kind of left me with the can people change? When I read the title, it's like, well, yeah. Duh. Yes, you can change. That's probably going back to mindset with Carol Dweck. So that to me was an obvious one.
I think that's a rhetorical question, to be honest, because
I think so too. Yeah,
you're supposed to. Well, yeah, of course, people can change, because the next question then is, well, why don't they?
Correct. Yes, and that's kind of where I was going. It's like, well, yeah, people can change, but that's pretty much an obvious point at this time. Like everybody knows that. Like, yes, you can change things. The trick here is she goes through the process of explaining that changing a situation doesn't necessarily mean changing the situation. It primarily means changing you and the way you're perceiving a situation. And that's convicting in itself. Like,
yep.
I don't really want to come to grips with that one, because it means that I'm going to have to change things. Like my motivations are going to change because it's all in my head in making that edit. So yes, there's a lot of good that can come from just realizing in my own mind what it is that what can lead to that change. So I just have to come to grips with that. It's not necessarily something that is an enjoyable process, but it is a good one to work through.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about in this, or should we wrap it up there?
I am good to wrap it up.
All right. Well, let's go into action items then. I have 2 of them with this book. The first one I mentioned already, and that is to make a list of what I value. But the other one comes from that same chapter. I don't think I mentioned this one, and that is to craft my own credo. Maybe I did talk about this. The word credo, I don't really like. She used some examples. This is just like a rallying cry for yourself personally. I've got the core values. I've got the life theme. I want to, though, create kind of like a manifesto. I think I talked about this previously, and I've done some work on it, but this gave me inspiration to go back and revisit it. And I don't know if this is going to be for me personally, because or something a little bit larger, because one of the things that I've been thinking about is like faith-based productivity is my brand, and what does that even mean? Right. So I actually have this idea to create like a faith-based productivity manifesto. I think that is going to be very much a personal manifesto, but I might make it public and share it with people also. So I'm going to commit to working on this. I don't know if it's going to be finished by next time, but I'm going to do some work on my manifesto / credo. How about you?
I'll take on one, just because this will make it a little bit easier to put. I've been trying to think about this as we've been recording here, but I want to work through these 3 C's on 3 different situations. And I'm going to do my best to like document some of this in my own notes that then I can share next time, because I think it would be interesting to see some of this in practice. And I've been struggling to figure out how to explain some of this on the show. So I want to like work through some of this, and then that should help, at least for me, try to cement some of the details here. So I kind of want to give it a run, because this seems like the sort of thing that could be pretty life-changing, but I want to prove that.
All right. So how do I summarize your action item? Prove the book?
The way I wrote it was work through the 3 C's on 3 situations.
Okay.
That's the way I wrote it on my own notes.
All right. Style and rating?
Go for it.
All right. So I picked this book. I will go first, and I will share that I really enjoyed this book. I don't really know what I was expecting, other than I wanted something good about motivation. I feel like this book delivered. So thank you, Martin, for the the recommendation. It's a short book. I mean, it's 50 pages ish, but it's pretty big type. It's pretty visual. I didn't track the time that I spent reading this one, but felt like it was I could crank through it pretty quickly. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, it was a fast read for me.
Yep.
It was one of those that I've been reading a couple other books, primarily one in the meantime, because this one was pretty quick and easy.
Yep. I will say I was nervous when I got the book and looked at the title, 3 Scientific Truths for Achieving Your Goals. You kind of pointed out, like, goals, Mike, you good with this?
Right. Yep.
There really wasn't a whole lot around goal setting. And maybe I would, if I was writing this, pick a different subtitle, but I understand why she did that. That's the term that everybody is pretty familiar with. And really, she's talking about the motivation to follow through and do the things that are important. Right. So this is a perfect complement to all of the books that we've done on habits, like Atomic Habits and Tiny Habits specifically. I feel this book is a good complement to those two. Tiny Habits kind of talks a little bit about some of this stuff, but I feel like Susan Fowler does a great job of addressing the topic directly and doing it succinctly. And like I mentioned, there's obviously a lot of science and research that has gone into this that is evident in the way that it's written. There's a lot of personal stories of people who have worked through this stuff, which honestly, towards the end, I found myself kind of skipping through some of those. But I don't think there's a whole lot of fluff in this book. So pleasantly surprised by it. I actually like the 3 parts. I feel like they're packaged really, really well, especially once I got to the end of this book. Felt like, that was really well written. And I think this is one that just about everybody should read. I don't have any other books on motivation to compare it to. I know somebody mentioned Drive by Daniel Pink in the chat, but I have not read that one. And from what I understand, talks about these same concepts, but has some different terms for it. I also know that one's quite a bit longer than this one.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like you really can't go wrong if you're interested in this topic at all. This is a pretty great read. How do I rate this book? I don't know, because I feel like it's really good. I feel very inspired walking away from it. I feel like all of this stuff is instantly applicable to me. You do have to kind of wrestle through the fact that if I'm just now coming to the topic of motivation, is this book really that life-changing? I don't have a track record to support that one way or the other. But that's really the only thing negative I can say about it. So I think that's going to keep me from rating it 5 stars, but I am going to rate it 4.5. I have trouble picturing a book about motivation that I would have enjoyed more than this one. And again, I kind of went into it with a side eye, like, I'm interested, but I'm not sure this is exactly what I'm looking for. And what I got was something I really enjoyed and I think is going to be very largely beneficial and very generalizable to just about anybody in the bookworm audience. Even if you feel like you don't struggle with motivation, I feel like there's a very clear framework here for you to figure out how to make it even better. And so it's not going to give you, these are the things that you need to do. You have to manufacture that yourself, but it gives you the understanding of the levers that you can pull. And I think it's a really good book. So thanks, Martin, for the recommendation.
So I have to say that, the whole goals thing, I'll say this. I had this book sitting on the table. A lot of times I'm reading over breakfast or right before breakfast, and it's usually sitting on the table and my wife will see it, and I'm always interested to know what her opinion of it is, because she is not a self-help business book person and thinks that it's a little bit ridiculous from time to time, some of these. And this one was like the epitome of all the things that are like make funnable when it comes to these types of books. Like it looks like it was designed in Microsoft Word on the front cover almost. And 3 scientific truths for achieving your goals. Like, it sounds kind of like a cheesy subtitle, right? But at the same time, like, once you get through the first couple chapters, like, she's kind of got you hooked at that point. And it's one of these that I kind of wish that there was a little bit more from an editor's stance on setting this up. Like, I feel like the title and subtitle and stuff, they don't really do it justice. It's one of those don't judge a book by its cover scenarios, even though like the cover is kind of what we use in a lot of ways to pick books. Like that, a recommendation in a short bio is sometimes all it takes to make it onto Bookworm, despite some of the marketing emails that people send us from time to time. So like, I feel like this one doesn't really do it justice for what's inside of it. So there's a lot of really good stuff in here. I think this is one that's going to kind of permeate a lot of different arenas and have a longer term impact. That's my suspicion. Of course, I have no way to prove that right now, but that's my speculation at this moment. Again, I don't think like when I was starting going through it, I was very skeptical, kind of like you, giving it the side eye. Goals, huh? Yep. All right, here we go. This will be interesting. What are you doing, Mike? Like, I know you kind of look at me sideways whenever I pick certain books. This was me looking at you sideways when you picked this one. And going through it, though, I'm fairly convinced that this might have a very big long-term impact. And I think that whether or not you fall into the category of someone who struggles with motivation or not, you're probably going to pick up some good stuff from this. So like you, I'm grateful to Martin for recommending it. I don't like you, I don't think it fits the 5.0 category. So I'll join you at the 4.5. I just feel like it's a really good book, but there are other really good books that are better yet. I just don't know what they would be in the world of motivation, but 4.5 seems to be a pretty good spot for this one to land.
All right. So let's put Master Your Motivation on the shelf. What's next, Joe?
Coming up next is a potentially controversial book, which will be an entertaining chat, I'm sure. 12 Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson. This is one that is written by a guy who it seems like people love or hate, and I'm not sure which team is bigger than the other. I know that they're both very large. So it should be a good one. It'll be fun.
All right.
And then after that,
I don't know. I do have to pick one. Okay. Well, this is what I'm going to pick. This is one that Toby turned me on to. It was a recommendation by Ali Abdaal. And Ali Abdaal, I find his book recommendations, I either absolutely love them or I completely disagree with them. Usually I can tell right from the video that he's recommending it. Okay. This one I feel like I have a pretty good feeling about. So this one was recommended to me by Ali Abdaal via Toby, who watched the video, and then I went back and looked at it. And I'm like, yeah, this one sounds pretty cool. The Pathless Path by Paul Millard. Imagining a new story for work and life. So we're inviting some existential crisis into our lives, maybe. But this one I've heard some good things about, and I'm going to drag you along.
Existential crisis. That sounds exciting.
Well, it should be entertaining at the very least.
Yes. I promise that is not how we pick books. It's usually something we're somewhat interested in, at least.
Well, I am interested in this one. I think I'm at the point where maybe you could call it a midlife crisis, right? But I'm just reevaluating, where am I at in my life? Yeah. What do I want the rest of my life to be about? I mean, that's part of my mission, and all the personal retreat stuff kind of contributes to that as well. But it's just been something that I've been thinking a lot about. And this book looks pretty legit. So I want to dig into it, and hopefully it helps a few other folks along the way.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you to everybody who attended the live recordings. Reminder, if you are in the Bookworm Club, which you totally should be, there are events which show you when these recordings are going to happen, and links to the YouTube live pages so you can join in the chat. If you want to be extra awesome, you can sign up to support the the club and become a pro member, $5 a month, $50 a year, you get access to the book note files that I create, the MindNode files. So I've got both the PDFs and the editable MindNode files. You get the bookworm wallpaper, and you get actually 3 different feeds for the show. You got the normal one, you get the pro show, which is the ad-free version, and then the bootleg, which gets uploaded after the live recording. So you get it a little bit early, and you get to hear all of the mistakes that Joe and I make and how stupid we sound. So if you want to make fun of us,
we make 0 mistakes. 0.
That is false. But if you want to make fun of us, that's the one to listen to.
Yes, that'll be very fun. Also, if you want to get to the pro membership thing, I also put in another redirect I should tell you about, Mike. It's bookworm.fm/pro. So you can get there /membership/pro, either one. To me, cool. Pro just seemed easier because I am what we call lazy. So there's that. Also, if you're one of these amazing people who reads along with us, pick up 12 Rules for Life, Jordan B. Peterson, and we'll cover that one with you in a couple of weeks.